Good afternoon. I'm Francis Johnson, founding partner of Davis Bozeman Johnson, and along with my partner, Molly Davis, we represent and have the pleasure of representing the Harvey family. Francis Johnson, F-R-A-N-C-Y-S, Johnson, J-O-H-N-S-O-N. I'm standing here with the Harvey family today because they were blindsided by a press release from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. The Savannah Police Department called in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to investigate the death in police custody of William Harvey, who was 60 years old. The Savannah Police Department promised that it would have nothing to do with that investigation, and the GBI promised that their investigation would be thorough and transparent. But before an autopsy, before a toxicology report, before they've completed taking statements or have shown any video to anyone, today on Friday, they released a statement which basically corroborates what the Savannah Police Department initially reported. And that was that Mr. Harvey took his own life in a police interrogation room with shoestrings from his own shoes. We are disappointed in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and this PR stunt to support the Savannah Police Department. This family was not contacted by the GBI, was given no advance notice of their so-called preliminary findings, and this family is here today to say to the Savannah Police Department and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation that they are not satisfied, that this is not the way that you handle an investigation of this nature, and this is not the way you treat a family that still has not done what so many families are having to do over this country, which is bury their loved one after a deadly encounter in police custody. And so Davis Bozeman Johnson Law stands with the Harvey family to get all of the answers that any family, black, white, brown, regardless. This is not a black or white issue. This is a red, white, and blue issue. We pay law enforcement. We pay the Georgia Bureau of Investigations to do the work that they do. It is tough work, but it is critical work so that we might all have some confidence in this system. And today the system has yet again failed the Harvey family. And so we are here to send a strong message to the GBI, to the Savannah Police Department, to do your job. Release the footage and show us whatever it was that you used to draw this conclusion in order to produce this very short statement on a Friday. And that is our statement today. Questions?
Mr. Johnson, a couple questions for
Sure.
you. You mentioned this was a preliminary release, I think is what you used.
Sure.
Can you break that down, what that means? Does that mean there's more to come?
I am not sure what that means. I did speak to the special agent in charge and relayed my disgust for this release on their website, as well as my dismay on behalf of the family, who began to receive calls from strangers saying they had saw this, instead of receiving a courtesy call from the GBI that this information would be released publicly. This is not the way that the family should be treated. And so I'm not sure what this preliminary finding is based on, because they don't have the contingent parts of their investigation complete. No toxicology, no autopsy. From the press release itself, it says that the GBI medical examiner has provided a preliminary cause and manner of death as suicide by hanging. And so that is the extent of their release. And they leave the public to draw conclusions. And that's not what a thorough and transparent investigation should do. It should provide answers.
And you're, since you are a practicing lawyer, I'm sure you've dealt with things like this before.
Sure.
In the past. Is this typically how the GBI or Savannah Police handle press releases like this, or would it be typical for them to reach out to the family prior to something like this being released?
Yes, it is always appropriate for law enforcement, including investigatory agencies like the GBI, to work with families and make sure that they're aware of these things. Georgia is unique in that it has a victims crime bill that is made a part of not just statute, but the Constitution. And victims of crime have constitutional rights to be informed. And I have had high praises for the GBI under the leadership of Vic Reynolds for taking a different tone under his leadership with the investigation of deaths in police custody. He has been swift and thorough in terms of executing a vision that these investigations need to be independent of the agencies for which they stem from. They need to be thorough. They need to be transparent. And the GBI has not shied away from holding officers accountable where they should. But this is a mark against that record today.
If you can you walk us through maybe some of the, protocols, I guess, of why a police officer would have stepped out of the interrogation room long enough for someone to take their life?
Those are the kinds of questions that you as journalists should continue to ask. We would assume that a police department and an interrogation room would be a place of high scrutiny, that a person would be under surveillance, and that their movements would be checked. And certainly they wouldn't be left long enough to untie their shoes, if we are to believe what was released today, and hang themselves before someone could be attended to them. We expect that people who go into a police department for questioning would emerge alive and not from a body bag. And so these are all questions that you as journalists should ask. These are questions that citizens should have, because remember, government can't do all things, but there are certain things that government can only do, and that is law enforcement. And so if this government, the state of Georgia and the city of Savannah, wants its citizens to have confidence in its operations, it needs to provide these common sense answers, to provide us common sense answers to these questions that spring to the mind of every person hearing this story and saying, something doesn't add up.
And what was he in custody for? Why was he in that interrogation room?
That is not altogether clear. We know that that he had been involved in some altercation earlier that night, and there has been some mention of some charges associated with that. Again, we have demanded that the GBI sit down with this family as early as Monday and provide some of those answers. In the wake of answers from the investigatory agency, we're left to conjecture. And so we won't do that. We're left to speculate. We won't do that. And we're left to draw inferences. And that's not what the public should have. It should have answers to why this family has to bury William Harvey tomorrow, and why this took place.
So last time Molly told me that you guys were planning on meeting with the GBI. That was
Sure.
the next step. Have you guys done that yet, or is that planned?
So again, I had a phone conversation this afternoon. Again, it was a terse conversation. It was sharp on my point, because this family, who I am charged to zealously represent as an officer of the court, has been mistreated. And so the GBI was responsive to my request and said they would make themselves available, and I think they will. That meeting will take place. It should have taken place before today's release, but it will take place on Monday. We're going to try to get this family through the funeral tomorrow and give them an opportunity to reflect and rejoice, as well as to release on Sunday. And then we'll sit down with law enforcement, hopefully next week, and begin to put together what happened here.
Last time we met, I think there were two things that were demanded from Mr. Davis and a couple
Sure.
of older women. It was for them to release the footage in the room if it was there, and also to release, I think they called it standard protocols.
Sure.
Any of those been released, or word of them?
Sure. Well, the standard operating procedures for law enforcement aren't something that need to be released. These are things that that govern the department and should be public information. The City Council of Savannah has oversight over their own police department, and that information should be readily available for scrutiny from all citizens. We've asked law enforcement to make sure that their standard operating procedures are in alignment with the President Obama's 21st century call for police reform, as well as the 8 Can't Wait campaign that was a part of the Black Lives Matter movement. We've asked that they also, and they don't right now, ascribe to CALEA, which is the certification of law enforcement agencies, the highest standard that we have in law enforcement. And right now the Savannah Police Department is not in alignment with those standards. And so that is something that the City Council can do right now in terms of evaluating its own department and its SOPs. The second part for us was to release the video. Release it. Just release it. The citizens, including this family, paid for it. The public is concerned, and you have within your ability to release it and settle the issue.
What happens if you release it, though? Is that something that can just be released to the family, or is that something anyone could have access to?
Well, ultimately, let's go down two hypotheticals. One, if the footage is in alignment with the narrative that has been released now twice, first by the Savannah Police Department immediately after Mr. Harvey's death, and then today by the GBI as a sort of press relations cover for the narrative put forth by the Savannah Police Department. If that video shows that, then what it shows is a great tragedy. And that would be unfortunate. But that would be the truth. And then we could put this to rest. But if it shows something else, anything else, including negligence of law enforcement in terms of leaving Mr. Harvey there alone, in terms of and I don't have this as an answer, and I want to know this, whether there was anything else done towards Mr. Harvey that might have contributed to his death, we ought to know that as well. And so we paid for that footage, release it.
Are you guys aware that it actually exists? Has SPD said they had it, but they're just not releasing it?
These are answers that you should not stop until you get. These are answers you should demand from the elected officials who have oversight over the Savannah Police Department and from the chief. These are answers that we want today.
Is there any action that you're going to be taking or planning on taking against the GBI? You said that this is kind of out of protocol, so is there any sort of, I guess, I don't know if it's legal or whatever, to take against the GBI for doing something like this?
The GBI is Georgia's premier investigatory agency. We have great confidence in Director Vic Reynolds. He has demonstrated that our confidence is well placed in the thorough and transparent investigations that his office has conducted under strained resources. Remember, this is the same agency that said we have so many police-involved killings that we are straining our budget to investigate them all. So we have great confidence. We have a meeting planned with Director Reynolds on Tuesday, and we plan on bringing this up, the conduct of his office here, and certainly raising this at that director's level meeting.
And do you know, I know you said that we should continue to ask some of these questions, but do you know if he was picked up by SPD or if it was one of their units, like the behavioral health unit? They have a couple of other units, or were they just regular SPD officers?
We are not exactly sure. But what we are told to believe is that a person is involved in some altercation, comes in and has some break with reality of such that he becomes suicidal. I know I've spoken with the Harvey family, the Francis family, and none of them believe that he would have taken his own life. And so that produces some cognitive dissonance between behavior that you are told is the conduct of a loved one and the behavior that you know of your family member. And that's why a thorough and transparent investigation, which was promised, is so necessary. And this family is prepared to deal with the truth as it is, but this family is not prepared to take the GBI's public relations cover for the Savannah Police Department late on a Friday as sufficient to the cause of a thorough and transparent investigation. This is not enough. They deserve better, and we won't stop until they get better.
Do you know, are we able to get any images of the victim in this case? I know the family's there, so are we able to get any footage of him or anything like that?
So there are a couple of images that they want the world to know and to have, and we released one of them. And then there is an earlier one, which is a part of the memorial tribute that they planned through Campbell & Sons Funeral Home for the funeral services tomorrow. And this shows Mr. Harvey in his life, in his prime, full of vigor and vitality. And that's who they want to celebrate, and they will celebrate tomorrow, and that's who they want the world to know William Harvey was. He wasn't some deranged man who killed himself in a police interrogation room. He was a son, a loving son. You heard Ms. Francis speak about that before, how he was her everything. He was an uncle and a brother, and most importantly, a member of this community, a citizen. And I know that we have this fixation on titles, president, mayor, etc. But contrary to popular opinion, the highest office in a representative democracy is not president or mayor, it's citizen. They derive their authority from citizens. And Mr. Harvey's death warranted a thorough and transparent investigation, which was promised. And today's press release is not consistent with that. We demand more.
Would there be a family member that could answer a couple questions?
Sure. Ms. Francis. Miss Sheeps. That's right. That's right.
Can we just get you to state your name and your relation to Mr. Harvey, please?
Felicia Shiggs, the oldest sister.
Could you spell it?
Felicia Shiggs, Shiggs.
Just starting off, you obviously have a very difficult day tomorrow. To be dealing with all of this on top of planning a funeral for someone you don't understand his passing, just walk us through some of the emotions your family is feeling right now.
Right now, we want to know how did it happen, why did it happen, basically, we just want to know why. I'm his youngest sister, Cherie Francis. I don't live here. I've come down from Powder Springs, Georgia, and I've been staying with my mother because she called and said she needed me. She needed me here. She needed all her children here because she's taking it and she's taking it really, really bad. We're really worried for her because she don't have any answers. And what they said is not indicative of what my brother was. I got married in September. My brother was at my wedding. If you could see the way he was, you know that that's not the man he was, what they said he did. All we want is answers.
You see this press release today, and GBI has yet to reach out to the family, correct?
That's right.
Right.
Yet you see this press release. What are you thinking?
Honestly, I'm feeling that's virtually impossible, what they said. Where in an interrogation room could he have done this? Where? how? You know, just like Mr. Francis said, we just show us the footage just so we can say, okay, you know, we need closure. And tomorrow we're going to be burying my brother. I don't know how my mother's going to handle that. I am worried for her, not just worried for her, worried for my sister.
Yeah.
She's my oldest sister.
Yeah.
Honestly, I took off a week from my job just so I can be here. I may not be shedding tears, but it hurts. But I know I have to be strong for my sisters and my mother and everyone else.
So, to just give you some sense as to this community, and it's not just here in Savannah, but it's everywhere. My partner, Maoli Davis, is in our Decatur office, and with the Williams family, the family of Matthew Zadok Williams, who was involved in a police encounter and was shot to death in his own home, and demanding answers for that family. So before we can get answers on one case, we're called to another. That's the state of affairs that we're in. And until we can understand what really happened here, we have to include this in the reign of violence that African Americans in particular, but all Americans are experiencing right now when it comes to encounters with law enforcement. You should know that between 1873 and 1950, there were 4,410 lynchings in this country, as documented by the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama. That's 73 years. It was 4,410 lynchings. Since 2015, the Washington Post has documented more than 5,000 deadly encounters with law enforcement in 6 years. More deadly encounters with law enforcement, where the narrative is the same, that an unarmed African American doesn't survive that encounter, than the total number of lynchings in all of what we know of as Jim Crow America. This is a crisis, and our confidence continues to be shaken in the system when you promise a thorough and transparent investigation and then you release a press release without even giving the family the dignity of a call.